Welcome to this lesson on Samsara, Nirvana and the Arahant. To begin, let's consider this quote from the Venerable Bede, an English monk writing nearly 1500 years ago. The Venerable Bede says that our life is like a sparrow flying through a convivial hall where there's much partying going on. We know what happens in the hall, but we don't know from where the sparrow comes or where it goes. Now this is the linear view of life. And it says that we're born, we live, and we die, and monotheistic religions like Christianity tend to posit that there is some afterlife. But it's all on a straight line. We're created, then we die, and potentially move on to an afterlife. The secular view ignores the blue section and says we're born and then we die and that's it. This view is not shared in India. When the Buddha began his preaching and teaching, Hinduism, as it still is, was the dominant religious and conceptual framework that his people would have thought through and in. And according to Hinduism, there is a cyclical nature of life and death, much more like the seasons. We're born, we die, and then we are reborn. This kind of agricultural metaphor, cyclical in nature rather than linear. And the Buddha said that although that was built on a misconception about the permanence of the soul, something that he rejected with the universal truth of anatta, he said that this framework was true. We are born, we live, we die, and then we are reborn. This cycle, this turning, is samsara. As you can see from the quotes on the screen, samsara means both the wandering on of the journey that the soul makes through life, birth, death and rebirth, and it also refers explicitly to several realms or natures of reality, places that we can be born into, which I'll talk about in a moment. Samsara also refers to a state of delusion or lack of understanding. So when a Buddhist is using the term samsara, they mean the realms in which we can be reborn, the cyclical process of rebirth, of wandering on, and also this state of confusion about the real nature of reality. I've illustrated this here with this optical illusion. Despite what your eyes are telling you, square A and square B are actually the same colour. This optical illusion illustrates that the way we perceive reality is not the way reality actually is. And that is exactly the point that the Buddha is trying to make about the nature of reality and the role samsara plays. Buddhism claims that people living in samsara have a clouded mental state. They are suffering from one of these three kleshas. So moha, which is ignorance, confusion, delusion; lobha, which is desire, attachment, greed; and dosa, which is aversion, anger or hatred. These three poisons or three fires are the thing that actually keeps us in samsara. You can see in this image there's the Tibetan wheel of life, and these three poisons or fires or unwholesome roots are actually turning the axle that is the Tibetan wheel of life. They are the things that keep us in samsara and keep us being reborn according to Buddhist cosmology. Were we to eradicate these poisons or fires, we would finish samsara. Samsara would end and we would access nirvana. Now, as you can see in this image, there are actually several realms in which a person can be reborn, and three are heavenly and three are hell-like, and the best is to be reborn in the human realm because that is where you have the greatest chance of reaching enlightenment. These 6 realms are the 6 potential arenas of rebirth. They are the 6 realms of samsara. But they are not great places to live in, and the goal of the Buddhist life is to transcend them, because they are all haunted and marked by these 3 universal truths. Now, the process of leaving the samsaric world behind begins with the status of the putujana, or the worldling, which is potentially my favourite word. The worldling is entirely ignorant and does not understand that samsaric reality is not true reality, and the worldling is subject to the 3 poisons, the 3 fires, is nowhere in terms of Buddhist spiritual progress, and so he's doomed to live in this endless cycle of birth, death and rebirth in a world, a samsaric world, that is characterized by dukkha, by pain, by suffering, and by loss. So the worldling is not a position that you want to be in. The Buddhist path seeks to elevate people out of samsara. So the next stage of the Buddhist path, according to the Theravada tradition, is that of sotapanna, which is a stream enterer. This is someone who has defeated or eradicated these 3 defilements. So the belief in a self, attachment to rites and rituals, and doubt about the teachings of the Dharma. By eradicating those 3, the worldling is now sotapanna and has made serious and significant progress on the spiritual path. The next stage is a once returner. Now, a once returner is someone who's going to come back to the earthly realm only one more time. And that person has made significant progress in eradicating sensual desire and anger. They are now a sakadagami. That does not mean that they've eradicated sensual desire and anger. They've merely attenuated them or reduced them greatly. If they were to eradicate them, they would become an anagami, a non-returner. And this is someone who will never return to the earthly realm again. The final stage on the Buddhist path is that of the worthy one, or the arahant. And according to Theravada Buddhism, this is the ultimate goal. This is someone who has eradicated not only the first 5 hindrances, but the second 5. Craving for existence in the form world, craving for existence in the formless world, conceit, restlessness, and finally, crucially, ignorance. By eradicating all of these 10 hindrances, the person will achieve nirvana. Now, nirvana means the extinguishing or the cooling down, and we can think of it as the extinguishing of these 3 fires that, remember, turned the axle of the samsaric wheel. Nirvana is very difficult to describe because it's supposed to be beyond experience, and language has only really evolved to describe the samsaric world and not the nirvanic world. Within Buddhism, there are several descriptions, both positive and negative. By negative, I don't mean insulting, but apophatic, and that is by describing something by explaining what it is not rather than what it is. And in that way, limiting a phenomenon is avoided. So in the Western tradition, you might hear God being described as a shepherd, and that has the positive features of saying, well, God cares for his flock, his people, is compassionate, but it also has the negative aspect of making God gendered. So now God is a man, also usually a poorly educated man or illiterate man, and these seem to compromise the universality and omniscience of God. So instead, someone might try and avoid using a term like God is a shepherd, and instead say something like God is not evil. That way, God is being described but not limited. And the same is true when we look at the negative descriptions of nirvana, where it is described as not produced or unproduced, not past, present or future. It can't be experienced by the senses, and free from suffering, craving, hatred, ignorance and rebirth. More positively, nirvana is described as cool water that relieves a fever, or medicine that cures an illness, an unshakable mountain peak, or the wind that is felt but not seen. Nirvana is understood differently by the two major schools of Buddhism. In the Theravada tradition, nibbana is used to describe the enlightenment experience. And so someone can achieve enlightenment, achieve nibbana, but still live in this world, where they will experience dukkha, pain, and even certain aspects of craving and want and desire, but they won't be negatively harmed by these emotions. Next, there is parinibbana, which is the death experience. This means nirvana without remainder, and this is always described in this very vague set of terminology because nirvana cannot truly be understood. And then in the Mahayana tradition, the arahant goal was seen as selfish because it focused only on one individual's enlightenment, and that seemed to misunderstand the intimate connection and oneness of all beings in the universe. It seemed to underestimate paticca samuppada, so the bodhisattva vow was instated instead, and this means that people won't achieve Buddhahood until everyone on earth has achieved Buddhahood. It's a universal salvation vow. And then finally, and sort of most complicatedly, and this is something that crops up on the A2 specification, nirvana, according to some Mahayana traditions, like the Madhyamaka school, is samsara. And that nirvana is simply understanding samsara. So that's an overview of samsara, nirvana, and the role of the arahant.